In my situation with a sports company, I had a snake in the business that wanted to chop my legs off, and they did. It worked, and you got to be careful who you surround yourself with and the culture you create. Way too many entrepreneurs are moving gravel every single week. They're not moving the big rocks. They're moving gravel. Start moving big rocks. In 2018, 15 years of building this company, the logo's tattooed on my forehead. My kids had all the apparel of the business. My best friends were in the business. Sitting in the boardroom, getting fired from the company you built to over $50 million of revenues after 15 years and losing everything was the moment I needed to sit back and go, whoa, what am I doing?
What's up, everybody? I'm Chaz Wolfe, Gathering the Kings podcast, coming back to you here today with another king on the stage, my man, John St.Pierre. How we doing?
Doing awesome, Chaz. Thanks for having me.
Good, man. I appreciate you being here. What kind of business do you have, John?
Chaz, I'm the CEO and chairperson of a company called Rhombus Group. We're a private holding company comprising of 6 businesses, small, medium-sized businesses, and then also just launched my first book, The $100 Million Journey. And so along with that, I do some one-on-one coaching, some speaking, strategic planning, personal life planning, coaching as well.
Yeah, I love it. You've got many things to be able to draw from here, and just excited to be able to get all of that out of your head, hopefully, in this podcast and out to the listeners. But tell us just a little bit. Let's dig in just a little bit because you've got a kind of like a portfolio of companies.
Yep.
Tell us what kind of industries that you're in. Maybe if there's any businesses that we'd recognize. Give us just a little bit of context here of where you're coming from.
Yeah, so we have a variety of companies in that portfolio, not all in the same market, but we have a facilities maintenance and construction company, so a national commercial business. We have a digital marketing business called IOI Ventures. We have a fractional CFO controller finance firm called Financial Wing. We have a travel business in the sports travel hospitality industry called Pellucid Travel. We also own a captive insurance company, and we have a hockey business as well.
Wow. Okay, so I've got to dive in here because not only are you doing a lot of very different things, but all of them at an extremely high level. And then, of course, we'll get to your book and stuff here in a second because I got all kinds of questions for you there. But there's a lot of people that I've heard say that, like focus on, one thing and one thing only. And you just described lots of different things all at the same time. How is it different for you, or was there a journey to be able to get there that maybe puts that into perspective a little bit differently?
Yeah, well, there's certainly a journey story behind that, Chaz, no question about it. But ultimately, I don't operate these businesses. These businesses are operated by their own CEOs, in some cases CEOs and presidents. And I, coach and advise and help them grow their businesses from the holding company perspective. But I'm not operational in any of those businesses specifically. So as a chairman of that business, I can pull myself above the trees a little bit and work strategically with those CEOs and help them grow the business that we aspire to build without actually having to be, operationally and working in the business.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so describe that relationship here because you probably got, CEOs listening here today, maybe even all the way down to one-man bands, and they want to be a CEO one day.
Yeah.
Describe that relationship, that difference between maybe strategic or, like you're saying, high-level planning versus being operational. What's the difference?
Yeah, it's one of the things I learned, through my journey is sometimes it's hard to, grow a business, be the CEO of that business, and do what everybody tells you should be doing, which is, no, John, work on the business, not in the business. Well, that's a lot easier said than done, Chaz. When you're working 60 to 80 hours a week, you're shoveling the dirt over here, you're solving the problems over here, you got the growth paradox issue, you're trying to hire some new people, you're running ragged all over the place. When do you work strategically on your business? Like, how does that happen exactly? And one of the lessons I've learned is, as an entrepreneur, do you want to be a business operator or do you want to be a business owner? Which one do you want to be? Are you trying to build a business asset that's going to create a tremendous amount of value? Or are you looking for a job? Because if you're looking for a job, you're going to go work for a complete lunatic, right? It's you. So you got to really think about which path you want to take. And that was a lesson for me because throughout most of my entrepreneurial career, I was the chief cook, bottle washer, CEO, you name it. I was in that business, fully in. And when I came to realize that if you move from CEO to chairperson, you can be more strategically involved, you can think a little bit more, and you can help drive the direction of your business. So today, in working with the CEOs that on our teams, really it's about the strategic planning process, about what that CEO is trying to achieve in their life, connecting it to the business, helping them get to, coach them to where they aspire to build their business and not make some of the mistakes I've made in my history as a CEO as well, and really support them with situational leadership, servant leadership, really trying to help guide them in their teams. And when there is a problem, I can roll up my sleeves and jump in there with them as well. I have that ability to go do that. But that relationship is really a relationship of coaching and helping them build the business they're aspiring to build.
Yeah, let's because we got kind of two layers here that I'm seeing form up. And I'm sure there's actually more than that, but just obviously,
Yeah.
the operator to CEO and then CEO to chairman. And there's you've given some pieces here of working more on the business or working more strategically. Give us a couple of things in there that the listener who is still the operator, very much in the business, and you're talking about, they get hammered, 7 different ways of you got to work on the business, you got to work on the business.
Yeah.
How can they do that as a CEO before becoming, the chairman like you are?
Yeah. Well, Chaz, I think this was, again, another lesson that I had learned is when I was a CEO of one of our businesses, we had grown a sports business to around $10 million of revenue, and it was going really well. And I got invigorated. I was like, okay, let's go. What else can we do here? And I looked at the team one day and I looked at the partner in the business. I said, look, next 5 years, I'm taking this business to 100 million. Let's go. And went after it. Right. And we ultimately ended up growing that business to north of $50 million of revenues. And then I got fired. And I was like, wait a minute. We just grew this company for 15 years. I was the CEO and co-founder of that business. It was my vision, what we were trying to build. And I found myself on the pavement. Like, what just happened? Well, the
Yeah.
reality is I was growing a business for the sake of growing it. It didn't really connect with my personal life plan. I was just going. And so I didn't really have, for me, growing to $100 million meant success. It meant fulfillment. Like, oh, look at me. We got this big business. But along the way of growing to 100 million, we're bringing on investors' capital. My equity gets diluted. I lost complete control of the business and I got put back on my butt, right? And so what was I trying to do? So to answer your question, if I'm talking to this person who's trying to build their business, the first question is, well, what are you trying to achieve? Not in the business. What are you trying to achieve in your life? What
Yeah.
is your life plan? Like, what do you want in your life in the next 30 years? Because maybe what you're building doesn't align. And I'm finding way too many entrepreneurs don't have a life plan. They have a
Right.
business plan. So, one of the things I've done, from that failure was, okay, I'm going to align my life plan with what I want to build as a business and have true connectivity between those two. Now I can go build the business of my dreams. And so I tell that CEO or that entrepreneur, do you have a life plan? Because most entrepreneurs I ask don't. Let's start there. Let's create your life plan. And now let's connect your business plan to that. Because unless you desire to go work 80 hours a week, be fully stressed out, not spend enough time with your family, eat unhealthy because you're traveling all over. If that's your goal, then fine. But if your goal is to create wealth and freedom through this business asset, maybe there's another way of doing it.
Yeah. You've set us up here for some great questions here. So tell us first off what goes into a life plan, and then maybe what would be for some first steps that you would suggest them taking to maybe identify what that would look like for them personally.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, again, it took me having a massive failure to realize that I didn't have one myself. So I get
Sure.
it if you don't have one, right? I was just going along thinking, oh, things were working. I got a great family, great wife, business is good, but I didn't really have something I was shooting for. Like, what was my passion? What was my mission? What am I trying to do beyond myself in life? What was my purpose? And
Yeah.
so, tools like Simon Sinek Start With Why, Gary Keller's The One Thing.
Yep.
There's a lot of tools out there. Jim Collins, the hedgehog concept. What are you most passionate about? What can you be the best in the world at? What drives your economic engine? I took all of those things together and said, okay, I got to figure out what my why is, what my purpose is. Because I used to always, Chaz, meet with my company. I'd meet with our executive team, Q4 of every year, go, okay, what's our why? I'd play Simon Sinek's video. What's our why for our business? What's our strategic business plan?
Yeah.
But I never did it for myself. I never sat down with myself and said, what am I trying to achieve? So ultimately, the format I came up with, and I do talk about it in the $100 Million Journey book, is I came up with a True North Life Plan format, which is what am I trying to achieve in the next 30 years? Think far out, 30 years in life, not in
Yeah.
business. In life, what am I trying to achieve? And then break it down into a few segments that are important to you. So my segments were financial, health, relationships, family, spirituality. Those you break up into your categories that are important to you and lay out a 30-year plan and then break it down and go, well, in 10 years, where do I need to be in these segments to be on track for my 30-year plan? And you can see where I'm going here. Where do I need to be in 3 years to be on track to my 10-year plan? Where do I need to be in a year to be on track for my 3-year plan? Where do I need to be this quarter, this month, this week, this day, this hour I'm doing right now, Chaz, what I should be doing towards my 30-year plan. And that's how
Yeah.
you align it.
the reverse engineer, process that you just gave to us comes maybe a little bit more naturally for some wired in a certain way to be able to think that way. For those that it's a little harder to kind of go like, I can see the vision. Most entrepreneurs do have some sort of a vision, maybe not 30 years out, but
Mhm.
they've got something that they can hold on to. Practically, how can they start walking that back? Because timelines get a little hairy sometimes. Is this even possible? Like, am I thinking that this is true? Like, what are my beliefs in this? Like, all of those things get really, really muddy as you're starting to back it up to figure out what you do today. Give us
Yeah.
some insight there.
Yeah. I think it was Bill Gates that said people always underestimate what they can do in 10 years. They overestimate what they can do this year, but they
Mhm.
underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So, what I truly believe is if you are setting a year plan for yourself, but you don't ultimately know what you want in 10 years, how do you know what you're doing this year is the right path? You may
Right.
be
Yeah.
undershooting what you should be doing this year for that matter. So, I truly believe in long term thinking. And I was talking to somebody recently that was a little bit older than myself. And I said, "You need a 30-year life plan." And they're like, "Well, I'm not going to be alive in 30 years." I go, hold on a second. I think people are going to be alive a lot longer than you think with what's going on right now. So you need to really think further out in your life because what ends up happening is we do things on a weekly basis that may be good for this week.
Yeah.
And you may get the instant gratification of this week. But what do you want long term? And so the same thing, you go back to that CEO that's running their small business, right? You may be doing the things today that's going to help you this week. But is it the things you should be doing today going to help you 10 years from now? And if not, maybe you should be rethinking. Maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Maybe you should be hiring somebody to do that so you can focus on building what you ultimately want. So I really think having that long term vision is important. But then to get into a bunch of time management things, right? I have a daily visualization that ties to ultimately what I want in life that I read for 12 minutes every single day to train my unconscious, subconscious mind,
Love
right?
it.
I have a weekly planner that outlines exactly what I got to do. And if I look at that weekly planner and there's stuff on there that doesn't align to my 30-year plan, some way, shape, or form, it shouldn't be on there. And that's how you ultimately become, really super efficient in what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, this is interesting. You've brought up several things here that I'm super curious about, as well as implement myself. But just real quick here on the timeline for that guy who was like, I'm not even going to be around in 30 years. I personally am working on right now a 100-year family plan.
Love it.
And maybe I'm alive, and I mean that would put me at 136. That there's a possibility to that. Maybe
I
I
think
don't know.
there is.
But the reality of it is that in my mind, I'm planning for 3 generations, and so I don't know if that 100 years includes me or not, but it will include the things that I'm deciding to do today. To your point, right? And so I think that that 30-year or out further, whatever that looks like for you, is super important. I'm a big hunter, so I'm archery guy. A lot of times you get stuck at the 30, 40, 50 yard. I just can't hit the target. Step back to like 75. Step back to 100, and you're like, wait, what? If I can't hit it at 40, how am I supposed to hit it at 100? It's just the way that it works. You step back a little bit, you can just see it a little clearly.
Mm.
A little clearer. Okay, so you mentioned several things in here. The 30-year life vision, broken it down. Okay, and then you quickly hurried up like all the way down to a daily visualizations. Like big gap on
Oh,
this
yeah.
side over here, 30 years out, all the way down to something I'm reading 12 minutes a day. Talk about how do I get from here to here? You don't have to give me every
Sure.
step, but then I want to ask you about that visualization.
Yeah, but now I'm thinking I'm rethinking the 30-year now. You got a 100-year. I think I got to step my game up here a little bit. Jeez. But 100, just a quick point on lifespan. I mean, the advances that are going on in technology and artificial intelligence and gene therapy, I have no doubt that you have a chance to live to 136 years old. I mean, there's just no doubt. And now, will you, weren't you? I don't know, but there's a chance for sure.
Sure.
And that's really interesting to me. Look, when I create my 30-year life plan, I work it all the way down to my year plan ultimately. I look at that occasionally. This is the time of year around, the beginning of the year where I actually look at it again and go, am I in track for what I'm doing? But then when
Yeah.
I have my life plan, I kind of put that aside. Now I'm working on, 90-day increments. Okay, what do I need to do every quarter of this year to achieve this annual plan? And then I back a track to it as well. Like I have a weekly plan every week. Oh, here are my top 3 priorities. Here's what I got in all these different segments, right? And whether it be my this business or that business or my book or whatever it may be. And I
Yeah.
break it all the way down. But really it's how do you become super efficient with how you're spending your time towards your goals, right? So, yes, I do work it all the way back down to a daily visualization, which basically articulates who I ultimately want to be in life, what I ultimately want to accomplish, just so I can always be reminded, right? And I think, Chaz, the biggest thing on that is the reticular activating system that is in your mind. The mind is so powerful. And I heard, I think it was Susan Sly who had mentioned this, but she was talking about the red car concept. Have you ever heard of the red car concept? Right.
I've heard it. Yes, go ahead. I think I know what you're talking about, but I've heard it phrased just slightly differently.
Yeah, it was kind of like, if you were driving around this weekend, how many red
Yeah,
cars did you see? And
that's
the
right.
answer would be, I don't know. I'm sure I saw some, but I wasn't counting them. But if I said, look, I'll give you $100 if you count how many red cars you see next time, you'd count them all,
Yeah,
right? Because your reticular activating system, the filter of your mind, is opening up to the things you should be seeing at any given time. So as an entrepreneur, if you're not training your mind to see opportunities and see what you're ultimately trying to create in your life, you're gonna miss them. You're just going to completely miss them. So that daily visualization helps me see the types of things I need to be able to see by opening my mind to be aware to ultimately what I want to accomplish. So I guess to make a long story short, how would I start? Create a life plan for yourself, know ultimately what you want to achieve, and then break it down as simply, if you know what you want to achieve in life, just break it down to this week if you need to. What do I need to accomplish this week? What are some of the big rocks I need to accomplish this week to be moving in the right direction, and focus on those rocks? That's the Stephen Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? With the big rocks and small rocks. Way too many entrepreneurs are moving gravel every single week. They're not moving the big rocks. They're moving gravel. Start moving big rocks.
yeah, that's a one-liner for sure. Drop the mic after that and just call at the end of the show. To kind of summarize here, we can figure out maybe what the red car is, that 30-year plan out, and then I'm bringing it all the way down into a highly descriptive form that I'm reading to myself every single day, so that way I can pay attention when the red car should be coming up.
Yes.
But I can do this in all areas. I mean, I think that I call it a couple different dimensions of kingship, but you're saying in all areas of life, it's like, okay, there's all these different pieces of life. So talk to us about that, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs that believe I can go hard after a business and I got to be all in and obsessed, but that then limits me to have then a great relationship, or to be a great dad, or to not be able to have a fitness, or all of the other things that you've mentioned. So what do those things look like, or how do I go about all of them at the same time?
Yeah. I mean, this concept of work-life balance is a bunch of crap, right?
Doesn't exist.
It's
Yeah.
work-life abundance. Prior to this show, your daughter walked in, right?
Yeah.
And it's such a cute moment. It's a real moment. This is work-life abundance. It's life abundance. Ultimately, people think they have to give. Oh, if I'm working so hard in my business, I can't have a good relationship, or I can't be healthy, or I can't be, there's a give and take. That's phony. And in my daily visualization, as an example, it's not about my business. Yes, there's a component of my business, but it's also about me. It's about my health and my eating habits and my workout habits and what time I'm getting up every day. It's about my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my kids. It's the full picture of who you are. Because if you can't bring yourself to be your full self to your business, then people see through that as well. So how can you accomplish this area of abundance where you're high powered in all areas? You want to have the best relationship, the best health, help your kids grow and develop. You want to have the best organization. You want to help develop the best leaders you can in your business. That's infectious.
Yeah. How do you look back at your story and go, this was the moment that I started to do the things that you're talking about, the 30-year reverse engineering, using a daily visualization? Because I'm going to guess, very similar to me, that you kind of just took off running. You
Yes.
probably had a good amount of success, and then you got smacked in the face and you were presented with a different way of doing things. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. I mean, Chaz, to your point, I was a young entrepreneur. I was a college pro painting franchisee, became a college pro general manager for a couple of years, made a lot of money in college running a painting business. I thought this thing called business was super easy. I had this all figured out, right? Then in the late 90s, we started an internet company that you would be connected to in some way, shape, or form, but it was handymanonline.com.
That's right.
And we were VC funded. And we were growing like gangbusters. I was the vice president of sales. I was 24 years old, traveling across the country, opening up offices. This thing called business is super easy. This is fun. I'm having a ball. And the crash happens. Bang. .com crash. And we ultimately ended up selling all of our assets to Service Magic, who became HomeAdvisor.com, who then merged with Angie and is now called Angie. That was our business. And I can remember driving back in my Jeep Cherokee from Beaverton, Oregon, back to Chicago, listening to Anthony Robbins' personal power tapes, trying to figure out what is going on, right?
Yeah.
I thought I had this thing all figured out, stock options, everything else figured out. And yet here I was on my butt going, okay, now what?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick myself back up, be an entrepreneur again. Let's go. And I got myself back up and start building again, building anew, and built the sports company I was mentioning earlier. And I just had this vision, let's grow. I want to build something big and let's go, let's go. And in 2018, 15 years of building this company, the logos tattooed on my forehead. My kids had all the apparel of the business. My best friends were in the business.
Yeah.
Sitting in the boardroom, getting fired from the company you built to over $50 million of revenues after 15 years and losing everything
Yeah.
was the moment I needed to sit back and go, whoa, what am I doing?
Yeah.
This is a second failure. The one was a crash, which is what I thought was going to happen didn't happen, and then here's another one. Self doubt, a reflection, and that turned real quickly into perspective, introspection, learning. What are my contributions to the situation, and how am I going to make sure this never happens again to me, or for that matter, any other entrepreneur I work with.
Hey, kings and queens, Chaz Wolfe. I want to talk to you about something that's super important to me. We put a lot of time and effort, we meaning myself and my team, into this podcast, into the content that goes out every single day. And if you have been getting any sort of value or insight from this, we want it to be able to reach other business owners too. So we would love if you would like, comment, share, leave a review, post, share again, all of the things on social media, on all the different platforms, or even on the podcast mediums of Apple and Spotify. We would love to be able to get our content into more hands, more entrepreneurs, so they can grow their business as quick as possible. Together, we are building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs who are committed to growing their businesses to new heights. So let's do this. Let's help each other. Let's help each other grow. Yeah. What were the components, the kind of the framework that you've given here? Again, like you said, you explained it, I'm sure, in depth in your book, but the framework of the 30-year plan and backtracking and using the daily visualization, what part of that didn't you have before? Or maybe it was the whole thing, but why were you, I would say even inside of those failures, you were still successful to a degree, right? Like you were still operating on certain principles, maybe whether you realize it or not. And so like, what didn't you have before that you got in that enlightenment after that second crash, but you obviously had some things because you were, successful, even though they bombed, you get what I'm saying? Like, give us a little bit more there.
Yeah. I had none of it. I never had a life plan. I was always very goal oriented. So if I set my mind to something, I would go for it. And I could, had a lot of successes, set target, hit target kind of, mode. So I was really good at that, but I didn't really have a life plan. There was segments of it, right? Like after listening to those Anthony Robbins personal power tapes as an example, I wrote down in my little daily planner at the time, like all the things I was looking for in a significant other, right? 34 things. Ultimately, I married Amy. She had 33 of the 34 things on the list subconsciously. So I was very goal oriented, but I didn't really have the full picture. I didn't really know what my purpose was in life. I didn't really know, really what I was trying to accomplish until this massive failure in 2018, where I really had to sit back and go, what's my purpose? And I had older mentors of mine ask me, well, I was, young gun spitting vinegar everywhere, right? They're like, well, John, someday you're going to figure out there's a deeper purpose than just growing something. Right. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm just going to go build this thing. And those conversations came back to remind me in this moment of failure, man, they're probably right. Because I was growing something for the sake of growing it. I just thought there was power in glamorization and growing something big. Right. But when you grow something big that you no longer control or own, right? What's the point of that? And so, yeah, I had none of it.
What's the nuance now? It's growing something big with what? Like what's the difference now? Because obviously you're still growing. You're still growing actually multiple companies.
Yeah.
What's the perspective change?
To me, it's the connection again between your life plan and your business plan.
Yeah.
So now I'm not growing something for the sake of growing it. Now I have a life plan. I know exactly what I want in my dream life. I know exactly what I need to be doing. I know exactly what I want to accomplish, in my dream life. So if I want to accomplish this, well, then here's how I'm going to align my strategic business plan to it, right? Yeah. If my life plan said, I want to go work 80 hours in a company and be fully stressed out, unhealthy, and doing all that, well, then I'd structure a business to go do that. That's not what I want. I ultimately want to be able to impact entrepreneurs, make a difference, and help them grow the business of their dreams. Well, I can't do that if I'm going to operate a business. So you have to align the two together. That was the biggest aha moment for me, is I never, ever, ever had my True North life plan aligned to my strategic business plan. I always had a strategic business plan, but I didn't have this side. And now I align the both of them so I can always look at, Am I creating a business that I want for my life? Or am I just creating a business to glamorize, look how big I built something, or look how much capital I grew? Like, business owners talk about this all the time. Oh, I have this size company. I just got $20 million of capital. They glamorize
Right.
those things, but
Sure.
ultimately is it tied to what they want in life?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a big well. I want to go back to the moment though. You're in the boardroom and you're fired from the company that you've just built to 50 million plus over the last 15 years. And like, I love that picture of your kids wearing the garb and, the logo tattooed on your forehead. You were all in, is what I'm hearing.
Yep.
So what went wrong? What can you share with the listener that you have perspective on now that you couldn't see in that moment?
Yeah. Well, I'd say those in the book, The $100 Million Journey, I talk about the 7 principles of entrepreneurial success. And the reality is, in this particular situation, I violated all of the principles.
Okay.
And upon learning the principles and applying those principles to my other business, I successfully grew that to $100 million the right way, applying all of the principles. But I'll run through the principles, Chaz, and you dive in wherever you want, right? But
Okay.
principle 1 is protect and grow your equity. It's the most important thing you have in your business to create wealth and freedom. 2, build your own capital. Because if you don't build your own capital, you don't build the net operating cash flow you need to self-finance your own growth, you're going to be going to banks and investors to go find the capital, which is going to violate principle 1.
Mm.
Principle 3, reinvest smartly. In the sports business, I was reinvesting carelessly. We were making money over here, and I was reinvesting as fast as I can over here. But where I was reinvesting, it was actually generating less net operating cash flow, which was hurting our ability to self-finance our growth, which is making us go get investors and bank debt, which violated principle 1. Principle 4, build a culture of intrapreneurship. If you ultimately want to have a business asset someday, you got to build people within the organization that can think like an entrepreneur, run the business like it was theirs. So you got to create that culture of intrapreneurship. Principle 5 is protect the house. There's a lot of situations, entrepreneurs, you have 100 holes in your boat, you plug 99 of them, guess where the water's coming through? Right through that other hole, right? So how do you
Mm-hmm.
protect your business properly? Principle 6, you would appreciate this based on when you're talking about your 100-year life plan. How do you access the owner's liquidity in your business? You got this business balance sheet and you got your personal life balance sheet. How do you move liquidity from your business's balance sheet to your personal balance sheet in tax efficient manners that can really help you and future generations of your family benefit from this business asset that you've created? And principle 7, how do you move from CEO to chairperson? Because you may not be the best person to run your business, but if you can move to the chairperson level, you can be more strategic and oversee the growth of the business and create something of huge value.
Wow. I'm in alignment with all 7 of those, and I'm going to pick 5 and 6 to dive into here. So
Let's do it.
I want to talk about protecting the house because you're right. And almost I see it as a boat, like you said, like we're, kind of building the ship at sea as an entrepreneur. And it's constant, trying to plug the boat. And eventually we have this dream of it being this huge cruise line and no ever, issues. How in the moment, the listeners right now, they're going, okay, so maybe I'm just starting my company. I'm only doing, a couple 100,000, or maybe I'm listening and I'm doing a couple 100 million, but I got these springs coming up in the house. How do I protect? What's some of the principles that you're sharing in that chapter? Or in
Yeah,
that principle?
absolutely. It's a game of whack-a-mole, right? You hit 2, 3, 4 down, 5, 6, 7 pop up. It's just like a continuous game, right?
Yep.
I think the first one is who do you surround yourself with? What's your team of protectors? And, Rich Hoffman, who's the co-host of our podcast, the Entrepreneurs United podcast, at one point when I was gung ho and running on my business, he's like, who's coaching you today, John? And I'm like, coach, I don't need a coach. I'm good. Like, I got this thing. Like, I don't need anybody to coach me. Right. And he reminded me of that after the failure, by the way. He's like, would a coach have helped you? And I'm like, oh, dang, you had to ask me that question. But like,
Probably.
who's coaching you? Do you have a professional, small, medium-sized business CPA, or are you using the mom and pop tax, accountant down the street? Do you have professional advisors, attorneys, commercial insurance agents, captive insurance agents, trust attorneys? Do you have a team where you look around the room and you're like, man, we got a team? Right now in our business, Chaz, I have 6 advisors on our team that are all world class. We do not sneeze unless all 6 are unanimously on board with the decision. If it's a big decision, if it's a one-door decision, like this is an irreversible one-door decision, we need all of our professional advisors to sign off on it. And when they don't, we pause. Okay, something's off here. Let's caucus. Let's get this thing together. 2, vulnerability assessments. when does an entrepreneur sit down and perform a full vulnerability assessment on all the holes that potentially exist on the boat? We're so busy running. When does that happen? It never happens. We just keep
It's
running.
never.
So,
Yeah.
when do you pause on an annual basis and do a vulnerability assessment? Maybe you need a little risk committee, a focus group amongst your team that does that. I'm not sure. There's a lot of ways to go about that. Do you have the proper insurance coverage? Are you careful of who you hire into your business? There's a book called Snakes in Suits. In my situation with a sports company, I had a snake in the business that wanted to chop my legs off, and they did. It worked, and you got to be careful of who you surround yourself with and the culture you create. So we go through all those different. There's more, but
Sure.
how do you protect the business from every single angle? And we go through a lot of those angles because as an entrepreneur, whether it be customer credit risk, customer going bankrupt on us for $250,000. We had a wire fraud situation where we wired $250,000 over to Asia by accident, never got it back. I mean, what are your financial controls? So there's a whole bunch of different areas you need to protect your business because one mistake, one lawsuit, one situation can really go back and violate principle 4, 3, 2, 1, done.
I'm assuming just because in my daily visualization, it's positive, positive energy. I'm focused on vibration and I'm all in, right? I'm only assuming that you're that way. And so how can you plan for all these things that you just said and putting a team together around the table of trust attorneys and thinking about how my wealth is going to perpetuate and other professionals that you just described, protecting the house, which is inevitably thinking something bad is going to happen. How do I
Yeah.
teeter between planning properly and not being negative is really what I'm asking.
Yeah, you'll love this term. It'll connect with you immediately. Do you have a healthy dose of productive paranoia?
Love
If
it.
you are not in this state of productive paranoia, you're blind because crap happens.
Yeah, it
Like
does.
literally, stuff will happen when you least expect it. And if you're not protecting your family's estate, as an example, in your 100-year plan, you never know what can happen. Right. So
Right.
how are you protecting it along the way? Not because you anticipate something's going to happen, but you're prepared in case something does. So how do you have that productive state of paranoia? I'm a trust first person. Like I love to build things. I'm very positive, optimistic. So I think the world's a perfect place and no one's ever going to want to be litigious with our business as an example. But all
Sure.
it takes is one situation where, an employee gets terminated. Next thing you know, you're facing a lawsuit because you didn't properly have your HR processes in place. It just takes those one situations and that distracts you from your strategic business plan. It distracts you from the why of your business, what you're trying to do. It distracts you from your true north life plan. It's stressful. It's draining. It's no fun. So if you
Yeah.
can, if you think about a highway with all these different exits and imagine the exits are all vulnerabilities, just close the exits. Just, you don't want anybody going off those exits and creating a
Right.
vulnerability, aspect for your business. So that's the way I view it.
Yeah, I'm in alignment with that. As I'm thinking about my 100-year plan, I know that stats tell me that in the third generation of wealth, if I'm first generation, it's my grandkids that are going to lose it all.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, well, I don't have any grandkids yet.
Yep.
So I can't like emotionally go, well, John is a terrible grandson and, Susie is, wild at heart and going to, spend all my money. I have no idea. They don't even exist yet, but I can take statistics to your point. I can think down the road and I can go, okay, let me create some frameworks here to where they can't even mess it up.
Exactly. 100%.
We're trying to have Rockefeller perpetuation here. Yeah.
Exactly. You got to let it keep going through.
Yeah. Okay. Number 6, I don't remember exactly what you called it, but it was the protection and then the perpetuation. So remind me of number 6 again.
Access owner's liquidity, moving it from the balance sheet to your
Mhm.
personal balance sheet.
Yeah, I think this is important because at some point, the listener may not be there yet, but maybe they are, where they've had success and they start to have some money and there's some either equity and or actual kickoff of cash. And they're like, let me go buy this not very smart thing. Or
Yeah.
how do I strategically plan just to move equity on a balance sheet like that? Maybe this is number magic. I don't know. What are you saying?
Yeah, there's a lot of financial instruments that we talk about in the book, and ultimately, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're building a lifestyle business where you want to maximize your income this year so you can go buy the material goods or whatever you want, this
Right.
principle may not work for you. This book may not work for you, actually. This book is really
Right.
meant for an entrepreneur who's building a business and wants to go from a lifestyle size business to a high performance, high value net worth business, right?
Yeah.
So the one way to do that, it goes back to principle 2. You got to build your own capital and have enough net operating cash flow to self finance your own growth so you retain your equity. Well, the one way to do that is to make sure you're very, very smart about how you access owner's liquidity, because you still want to pay yourself. You still want to create wealth for yourself along the journey. You don't want to wait till someday you might get a pot of gold at the end. How do you do that? But if a business today, Chaz, made $1 million of net income, and you just distributed that to the partners as an example, right? 40 to 50% of that's going to taxes. Not a very smart way to do things. But there are instruments that are out there, captive insurance programs that further protect your business with extraordinary coverages that also reduce your taxable income, and you create another business asset for yourself and your business that's taxed at lower capital gains as opposed to ordinary income. So we get into some financial instruments here.
Sure.
There's we do in our business 401k cash balance profit sharing programs, where all of our employees participate in that program, where they automatically get 3%, whether they participate or not. They all get 3% of their salaries in their retirement programs. There's a vesting period and such, and we do profit sharing for them on an annual basis. But by doing that, it allows the owners of the business to put 10 times the maximum IRS allowable limit into our own 401ks, which reduces our taxable income and creates wealth for our family. So there's a bunch but guess what? I knew none of these instruments. You don't actually end up learning about some of these until you surround yourself with the right amount of protectors around the business that can help share that with you. And what we now do with some of that business, that's why we have multiple entities, is we also reinvest into other entities. Because by reinvesting our capital into other entities, sometimes you get accelerated depreciation and other tax benefits that reduces your taxable income. So we're able to hire more people. That's what the government wants you to do. They want you to build more business, build more commerce, hire more people. So by doing that, our taxable income comes down. So instead of the money going to the government, we have the money building our business assets and building our wealth along the way. And that's ultimately, I think a lot of people think, in order to access owner's liquidity, I got to sell my company. I got to bring on a minority investor. I got to bring on maybe a majority investor. And I'm a big proponent of no, build your business asset. If you want to get out of your business, sell 100% and get out. That's fine. But ultimately, you can build business assets that create a tremendous amount of value for you and your family for the next 100 years by deploying some of these principles correctly.
I love it. What would you say that the average entrepreneur, outside of the fact that they don't have a life plan, because all the things that we're talking about are connected to that, that's clear. But once we get past that, these 7 principles that you kind of discuss here, we just discussed 5 and 6, but what's the hardest one for entrepreneurs to kind of wrap their minds around in your experience?
Principle 2.
Okay.
Build your own capital.
Yeah.
Does
it feel slower to them, or what's the response?
If there's 100 entrepreneurs listening to this, and I said, raise your hand if on a monthly basis you measure the performance of your business based on the profit and loss statement, all the hands would go up.
Sure.
And Alan Miltz, who runs a company called Cash Flow Story, he was the co-author of the chapter Cash in Vern Harnish's book called Scaling Up.
Okay, yeah.
He says, if you measure your business based on your profit and loss statement, you're basically reading a murder mystery novel and only reading the first chapter and thinking you know how the story is going to end.
Okay.
There's other instruments, and the one instrument that most entrepreneurs don't know how to calculate is their net operating cash flow. And based on how much cash flow you generate, you can literally calculate your self-financeable growth rate. So there's a Harvard Business Review, and the article was called, How Fast Can Your Company Afford to Grow? And the reality is every entrepreneur listening to this has no clue, because I didn't. And no entrepreneur I've ever talked to knows exactly what percentage you can afford to grow. So Chaz, if your company can afford to grow 5% a year based on the cash flow you're generating, but you are a motivated entrepreneur, you want to grow 20% a year, where's the other 15% come from?
Yeah, we're not going to just get lucky and grow? What are you talking about?
It's going to come from investors. It's going to come from debt, right? Which then puts pressure on principle 1, protect and grow your equity. So you want to own a business where you own 100% of it or a majority of it, but over time, you're growing above your skis and you grow yourself poor. I mean, the one thing that entrepreneurs don't understand, you can grow yourself out of business. You can be a victim of your own success because you don't know how to calculate your self-financeable growth rate, your net operating cash flow, and the financial instrument of your business is broken. You're growing for growth's sake. And that's what happened to me. I was growing so fast. We were successful because our revenues were going like that. I was like, this works. I was looking at the profit and loss statement. Oh, this is working. We're in good shape. But we had no cash. So I had to go back to the bank. Oh, bank, we need more debt. We need more debt. Well, then at some point, I had to delever the balance sheet. I had to go get investors. Investors, come on in. And then I'd brag, oh, we just raised $20 million. Look at this. Next thing you know, I get fired. Right? So build your own capital is the hardest one. I provide some workbooks and tools on how to exactly calculate those numbers for you and your business. But yeah, it's a tough one, and you really got to master it. Because if you can master building your own capital, now you're in business.
What kind of timeline? I mean, you're talking about $100 million business that you grew after a $50 million business. I know that less than 9% of all businesses do even $1 million in revenue, let alone $1 million in net. The person that's listening right now is like, these are really big numbers. I don't, you're talking about fund my own growth. You're talking about like a much slower process, probably. Maybe not, but wrap their mind around how can I even get to what you're talking about at $100 million level?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I'll say this right away. Would you rather own 10% of a $100 million business or 100% of a $10 million business? And the reality is, I felt if I owned 10% of a $100 million business, that'd be fantastic. But guess what? It's 50 times harder to build a $100 million business than it is a $10 million business. It's not linear, right? And
Right.
so these principles are not for somebody who wants to build a $100 million business. The $100 million journey was my journey. It may not be your
Sure.
journey. What is your true north life plan? What are you trying to accomplish in your life? What do you want in your daily life? Now let's build a business that can accomplish that. Build the business of your dreams. Your dreams may be to have a $2 million business, a $3 million business that you own 100% of, that has great margins, that creates wealth for you and your family you never imagined. So it really depends on what you want to do. But way too many times, entrepreneurs glamorize building a 100, 200, $300 million company they own 5% of, or 2% of, or 1% of, or own
Right.
none of it
Right.
ultimately. So it's a very risky, dangerous road. But if you aspire to grow a business of high value, there's a lot of pitfalls, there's a lot of cliffs. You got to be careful. And this book was specifically written for those who want to build a business of high value, to be dangerous for all of those cliffs. But it also applies to small entrepreneurs trying to build the business of their dreams.
Yeah, I think that the way that you're defining high value, you did a great job there. If I own 100% of a $10 million business, in essence, it's effectively the same from a net perspective as the 10% of a $100 million business. There's just a whole lot less things that have to happen for me to actually be able to achieve it. Now, there are some things in here around, principle one, making sure that you have people around you. At the bigger company, you probably have an advisory board, stuff like that, where if you're smaller, then maybe you have to, join groups, gathering the kings, or programs, or
Exactly.
other things to be able to get a hold of that same principle. But in essence, it's effectively the same. I want to change gears here on you because I got some questions. You mentioned earlier that even before some of the failures, that you still had a great family and great kids and great wife, and especially now with the daily visualization and you like really focused on those things. How can the power of you and your marriage, that's truly the core, but then of course after that is then you and your children, but talk about you and your wife for a second and how that's played into some of the early success and or even now the success that you're enjoying today. How are those two things linked?
Yeah, wow. Um, After the .com failure, after the Handyman Online, and that is when I met my wife. And I was in no position to be an entrepreneur at that particular moment. I didn't have the cash, the capital to be able to go start something significant. But she had a stable career, chemical engineer, very smart woman, and she provided me the ability to go pursue my dreams of being an entrepreneur. So right from the get go, right, like it's like okay, right, that's where that is.
Yeah.
And as I was growing these businesses, she saw how goal oriented I was and how big I wanted to build these businesses. But guess what, Chaz? When I would talk to her about bringing on capital and bringing on investors, and we're going to 100 million, her comments were, "Are you sure that's what you should be doing? Like, you should be careful. Like, you sure this is smart? Oh yeah, I got this. Yeah. No, this is good." Right. So imagine
Yeah.
that
Engineer mind.
night coming back from the board meeting and her getting up from the couch and giving me a hug, and how hard that was to be
Yeah.
like, "Honey, I effed up. You're right." Right? And the support I got to keep going, and the time I needed to reflect and get these learnings. And so the learnings became a little bit more than just me. I had to take these learnings for my wife, for my kids, for my family, so they could see me. My kids now, were 10 and 12 at the time, are now 15, 16. They've seen me go through this journey of failure to rebuilding to perseverance. And I'm sure that's going to have a massive effect on them. So just all of that space to be able to go learn, reflect, and the support, it's unbelievable. And whether it be your spouse, or whether it be your friends or your mentors, your coach, or whoever you have around you, that surrounding is so important. And how you feel about your surrounding will play into the energy you bring into your business every day.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're saying your wife's an engineer. Obviously, she's super smart and thinks about things in process. And probably at least all the engineers that I know, they know how to do it, and they don't have a problem telling you. And so I can only imagine some of the conversations that you guys had around her opinion on the order that things should be done in, and how clearly maybe sometimes you listened, sometimes you didn't. But after all that, regardless, the moment that you just described is where the power is because you inevitably felt like no matter what happens, it doesn't give you permission to be frivolous, but it gave you permission to be free and even to make bad decisions and fail, which is like really kind of tough, I think, for some spouses where it's like, well, I don't want you to fail, so I'm going to try to control situations. And so there's this balance here. And I don't know if balance is the right word because we don't believe in that, but there's this relationship of support, yet guidance, yet like mastermind. I mean, Napoleon Hill talks about this. Like it's the ultimate mastermind in the marriage where something can be born from these two minds. And it sounds like you guys couldn't be more opposite also. So it's pretty perfect.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's funny because a lot of people talk about their spouses always being right, but unfortunately, in my case, she always is. So I have to, learn from that. But I think at the end of the day, it's when you feel empowered with your health, when you feel empowered with your relationships, when you feel empowered across the board, you can then be empowered in your business, and you can have a free mind to be strategic and free and grow and build the right way. And so that's why this life plan continues. I just keep coming back to that as one of my biggest learnings because you have to make sure you're aligned in all these different areas or you can't bring your full self.
That's right. That's right. All right. I got one last question here for you, John. I want you to roll back the clock. I'm going to let you, because you got a couple of moments here. Maybe it's even younger. I want you to talk to the younger John. You pick the age. You tap him on the shoulder and you whisper in his ear. What do you tell him?
Well, if you open the $100 million journey, I love your question. The first thing you'll see in the book is something I call Dear Entrepreneur. And it's signed Your Future Self.
Yeah.
So in the absence of reading that, the overall emotion of that letter to the entrepreneur is, you think you know it all when things are going well, but you may not. And you need to have patient ambition, not just ambition, not careless ambition, not ambition, no, raw, look at me, I can go do this. You need to have patient, calculated ambition to build the business of your dreams the right way. Otherwise, you risk making some fatal mistakes along the way. And so how do you surround yourself with the right people? How do you take time to make two-door decisions instead of one-door decisions? How do you put yourself in a position where you can actually thrive and not be just driving carelessly around in circles? Because if you don't know where you're going, any path will do. That saying, I don't know who said it, but they go, you don't know where you're going, any path will do. But unfortunately, in my situation, I was driving the car around. I was going really, really fast. It was really, really exciting. But then it's like right off the cliff. And don't let that happen to you is ultimately the message. And you can prevent it by just having that patient ambition, being a little more calculated, study, bring people around you, get coaches, join mastermind groups like you talked about. All those things are so critical to surrounding yourself and building something the right way. But have patience. Have patience. If you could build the business of your dreams, it doesn't have to happen next year or in 2 years. It can happen in 10 years and you'd be extremely fulfilled. So have patient ambition.
I love it. That's a great way to end. What a pure message. Truly, we get ahead of ourselves and our urgency problems or our ego or comparison game. I mean, you name it, we can go down the list. John, number one, where can we find the book? Or if I'm an entrepreneur that wants to dig past the book, I want to maybe even hire you as a coach or network with you somehow, how can I find you?
Yeah. So the book is on Amazon, The $100 Million Journey. Our website is 100mjourney.com. So 100M as in Mary, journey.com. And on social, you can find me at John St.Pierre 100.
I love it. Okay. Well, you've been incredible. Your journey is vulnerable. And we appreciate you sharing those moments and seeing how those failures have raised you to where you are and sharing all that juice. So appreciate you being here. Blessings to you and your family and all the businesses that you're impacting. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chaz.
Thank you for listening to Gathering the Kings today. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.